Ever been there? You're trying to get your head around something new. Maybe it's a complex report for work, or you're finally trying to learn that new skill.
Yeah.
And it just feels like your brain is like totally full at capacity.
Right, like you're trying to pour more water into an already overflowing glass.
Exactly. That feeling, that information overload. Well, it's something we all experience, and it's exactly what we're going to try and untangle today.
Hmm.
We've got a really insightful study, actually. It's a review from the Educational Psychology Review, and it dives right into how our brains process information, this idea of cognitive load, and crucially, what actually motivates us to learn and engage.
That's right. We're looking at a pretty comprehensive review article here. It brings together two really powerful frameworks, cognitive load theory on one side and self-determination theory on the other.
And what makes this especially useful, I think, for you listening is that it also pulls in findings from a big survey.
A large-scale survey, yeah, of Australian high school students.
Yeah.
So it gives us a good look at how these sort of theoretical ideas actually play out in a real classroom.
Okay, so your mission for this deep dive, and hey, if you're listening, you're already on board, is to understand how different ways of teaching, or maybe just presenting information generally, affect how much mental effort you have to put in.
Right, the cognitive load part.
Exactly. And also what keeps you interested, what keeps you engaged, and, ultimately how well you learn from it all.
Our goal really is to give you some clear, hopefully actionable insights into making learning more effective and maybe a little less painful sometimes.
Definitely less painful.
Yeah.
Okay, let's unpack this. Maybe start with the basics. Cognitive load theory. What's the core idea?
Okay, so at its heart, cognitive load theory tells us that our working memory, that's the bit of your brain doing the act of thinking, like right now as you listen, it has limited resources.
Like the RAM on your computer. I think you mentioned that before.
Exactly like that. There's only so much space, and if you try to run too many demanding programs at once, things really slow down. They crash even.
Okay. So within this cognitive load, there are different types, right?
Yeah, we generally distinguish between two main types. First up, there's intrinsic load.
Intrinsic load. Okay, what's that?
This is the inherent difficulty of the actual material, the stuff you're trying to learn. It's the mental effort needed just to grasp the core concepts of the task itself.
So like if I'm trying to understand, I don't know, quantum physics,
Good luck with that.
haha, yeah, the complexity of those ideas themselves, that's the intrinsic load.
Precisely. It's essential work your brain has to do to actually learn the subject. You can't really simplify away the core complexity of some topics without losing the meaning.
Right, that makes sense. It's part of the learning. But then there's the other kind.
Yes, then we have extraneous load. And this is where things can get really interesting and, frankly, often unnecessarily difficult for learners.
Extraneous. So, extra. Not needed. Yeah.
Pretty much. Extraneous load is the mental effort that's imposed by how the information is presented to you. It's not about the information itself. And crucially, it doesn't actually contribute to understanding the core material.
Okay, so it's like wasted effort.
Exactly. In fact, it can actively hinder learning. So the key insight here for you listening is that poorly designed learning materials or confusing instructions, they're actively making things harder for absolutely no benefit.
Wow. Okay. Can you give an example?
Yeah, think about those terrible instruction manuals you sometimes get, like for flat-pack furniture.
Oh, I know those. The diagram's on page 2, the text is on page 5.
Exactly. You're spending a ton of mental energy just flipping back and forth, trying to connect the picture with the words. That cognitive effort, that's extraneous load. It's often called the split attention effect.
Right, because your attention is split between two things, trying to hold them both in your head.
Precisely. Good instructional design aims to minimize all that unnecessary mental clutter. It lets you focus your limited working memory on the intrinsic difficulty, figuring out how screw A actually fits into part B.
Okay, so minimize the extraneous, focus the effort on the intrinsic.
That's the goal. And cognitive load theory generally suggests that when you're tackling something new, especially if it's complex, you really benefit from instruction that has clear support and guidance. It helps manage that initial cognitive load.
Which leads us to this idea of load reduction instruction.
Exactly.
Okay, so what exactly is load reduction instruction? It sounds like something we could all use, whether we're learning ourselves or maybe trying to teach someone else.
Yeah, definitely. Load reduction instruction is essentially a set of principles for designing teaching or materials to minimize that unnecessary extraneous cognitive load we just talked about.
What are some of those principles?
Well, the core ideas are things like breaking down complex information into smaller, more manageable chunks, reduce the initial difficulty.
Step by step.
Right. Providing plenty of support and scaffolding as learners get started, but then gradually removing that support as they get better, as they become more competent.
Makes sense, like training wheels.
Exactly like training wheels.
Yeah.
Also, creating structured opportunities for practice, giving timely and genuinely useful feedback that helps learners see where they can improve, not just a grade.
Okay. Anything else?
And then, maybe later on, when learners have built up enough prior knowledge, designing guided, independent projects where they can apply everything they've learned.
That sounds like a really sensible approach to teaching and learning. You start with support, you practice, you get feedback, and then you apply it more independently.
Yeah. And this study also mentioned, interestingly, that student surveys can actually measure pretty reliably how much students feel their teachers are using these kinds of load-reducing strategies.
Ah, okay. And this is where it gets really interesting, right? Because now we start connecting this cognitive load stuff with, well, motivation, our drive to learn.
This is a really crucial link. You see, cognitive load theory itself doesn't really directly address motivation in its original form. But researchers, naturally, have looked into this relationship quite a bit.
So what did they find? Was there an early idea about how load and motivation connect?
Well, initially there was this perhaps counterintuitive idea floating around. Some thought maybe increasing extraneous load, making things a bit confusing or unnecessarily complex, might somehow boost motivation.
How would that work? By forcing people to try harder.
Kind of. The idea was it might force learners to engage in deeper processing to figure things out, like adding, I don't know, superficial complexity to math problems, thinking it would make students engage more.
Sounds a bit backward. Did that pan out, making things confusing to make people more interested?
Not really, no. The studies that tried to test this generally didn't find any good evidence that it actually improved motivation or learning outcomes. If anything, it just seemed to cause frustration.
Okay, so that idea didn't hold up. What did the research consistently show about the link?
What the research did show, pretty clearly, is that excessive extraneous load, that unnecessary difficulty, it has negative consequences for motivation.
That seems more intuitive, if something's pointlessly hard.
Right. It creates psychological stress, it causes frustration, and that naturally makes people less willing to invest the effort needed to learn. Think about it, if you feel like you're banging your head against a wall because the instructions are bad, you're likely to just give up.
Yeah, I can totally see that. The study even mentioned something striking here, didn't it? About self-efficacy.
It did. It found that high extraneous load actually undermines students' belief in their own ability to succeed their self-efficacy over time. And this happened independently of how well they were actually performing.
Wow. So even if you were managing to succeed, the struggle caused by poor design could still make you feel less confident long term.
Exactly. That's a really powerful indicator of how much the presentation, the instructional design, truly matters. It really highlights the potentially damaging impact of just bad instruction.
Okay, so high extraneous load is bad for motivation. What about the flip side?
Well, more encouragingly, when extraneous load is reduced, motivation tends to improve. People feel less stressed, more capable, and more willing to engage.
And this ties back to that load reduction instruction we talked about.
Directly. Those strategies designed to minimize extraneous load, like breaking things down and providing support, have been shown to be positively linked with academic motivation and engagement.
So less pointless struggle equals more desire to learn and participate. That seems like a really important takeaway for, well, for anyone involved in learning or teaching.
Absolutely.
Now, the study also brings in another really key piece of the puzzle, self-determination theory, SDT. For listeners who might not be familiar, what's the core idea there?
Okay, self-determination theory, or SDT, is a major theory of motivation, but it focuses particularly on the quality of our motivation. It's not just about how much motivation you have, but what kind it is and what fuels it.
Quality of motivation.
And within SDT, there are a couple of key ideas that are super relevant to learning and how you approach it.
All right, what are those foundational concepts we need to grasp?
First, SDT proposes that all humans have three basic psychological needs. These are fundamental, like needing food and water, but for our psychological well-being.
Three basic needs. What are they?
They are competence, relatedness, and autonomy.
Competence, relatedness, autonomy. Okay, let's break those down. Competence.
Competence is that feeling of being effective, capable, mastering skills, feeling like you know what you're doing and can succeed.
Got it. Relatedness.
Relatedness is about feeling connected to others, having a sense of belonging, feeling cared for, and caring for others. That social connection piece.
Okay. And the third one, autonomy.
Autonomy is about feeling like you're in control of your own actions and decisions. Feeling a sense of choice, volition, that you're doing things because you want to, not just because you're being forced to.
Right, not just being a puppet.
Exactly. And SDT argues that when these three fundamental needs, competence, relatedness, autonomy, are supported, are fulfilled, we experience greater well-being, and we're much more likely to be autonomously motivated, intrinsically motivated even.
That makes a lot of sense intuitively, doesn't it? When you feel good at something, connected to the people involved, and like you have some say in it,
Yeah.
you're naturally going to be more engaged.
Think about times in your own life, when those needs were met in a learning situation, how did it affect your desire to engage and really dig in?
Yeah, definitely more positive. Okay, so that's the basic needs. What's the second key mechanism from SDT relevant here?
The second big idea is the motivation continuum. SDT sees motivation not just as on or off, but existing along a spectrum.
A spectrum.
Yeah.
Okay, what are the points on the spectrum?
Well, at one end, you have a motivation. That's basically a complete lack of motivation, feeling no desire or intention to engage at all, just apathy.
Right, I don't care. I don't want to do this.
Exactly. Then moving along, you get into controlled motivation. This is when your behavior is driven by external pressures or internal pressures that feel controlling.
Like what?
Like doing something only to get a reward or avoid a punishment that's external regulation, or doing something out of guilt, or to boost your ego, or avoid shame. That's called introjected regulation. You're doing it, but it doesn't feel truly voluntary.
Okay, so you're motivated, but it's kind of forced, either from outside or inside.
Yeah, it lacks that sense of genuine willingness.
Yeah,
But then as you move further along the continuum, you get to autonomous motivation.
and that's the good stuff.
That's generally considered the higher quality motivation. This includes identified regulation, where you do something because you personally see its value or importance, even if it's not fun, like maybe studying for an exam because you really value getting the qualification.
Right, you see the point.
And then at the far end, you have intrinsic regulation, or intrinsic motivation. This is doing something simply for the inherent interest, enjoyment, or satisfaction of the activity itself. Learning just because you love it.
The holy grail of motivation, perhaps.
You could say that. And SDT suggests that a teacher style or an instructor style, how they interact with learners, plays a huge role in determining where learners tend to fall on this continuum.
Ah, okay. So it's not just the subject matter, but how the learning environment is set up and the approach of the person leading it.
Absolutely. Which brings us neatly to the different motivating styles teachers can adopt. The study looked particularly at this contrast between autonomy support versus control, and also the presence or absence of structure.
Right. So autonomy supportive teaching, what does that look like in practice?
Well, an autonomy supportive teacher tries to take the learner's perspectives. They try to understand things from the student's point of view. They work to spark curiosity and genuine interest in the subject matter itself.
Okay.
They provide choices where it's appropriate, give meaningful rationales for tasks, and importantly, they acknowledge learners' feelings, even the negative ones like frustration or boredom, without being judgmental.
So validating the student's experience.
Yes, and this whole approach, research shows, tends to foster greater interest, deeper understanding, and more of that high-quality autonomous motivation we just talked about.
Okay, that sounds pretty positive. What about the flip side? Controlling teaching, what does that involve?
Controlling teaching often relies heavily on external pressures. Think rewards and punishments, grades used as threats, deadlines imposed without rationale.
More stick and carrot.
Kind of. It often involves using pressuring language like, you have to, you must, you should. And it tends to view any negative emotions from learners like complaining or looking bored as unacceptable, maybe even defiant.
Yeah, I can see how that would feel very different. It focuses more on just getting compliance, maybe.
Exactly. Compliance and adherence to the rules, rather than fostering genuine engagement and understanding.
And that sounds like it would directly undermine those basic needs we talked about, competence, relatedness, and especially autonomy.
It often does, yes.
Yeah.
Now, the other dimension they looked at was structure. How does structure fit into this?
Yeah, because sometimes people equate structure with being controlling, but it sounds like they're different here.
They are distinct concepts in this framework. Structure in teaching is about providing clarity and predictability. It's about setting clear learning goals, communicating expectations effectively so students know what success looks like.
Okay, like having a clear roadmap.
Exactly. And it also involves giving process-oriented feedback. Feedback that focuses on how the student is learning, what strategies they're using, highlighting strengths, and specific areas for growth, rather than just judging the final outcome or giving a simple grade.
So structure helps students know what to do and how to improve.
Yes, and because of that, structure actually supports the need for competence. It helps learners feel more effective because they understand the path forward, and that, in turn, supports motivation.
Right, so structure is generally a good thing, supporting competence and motivation. What's the opposite of structure then?
The opposite would be a chaotic learning environment. Imagine a classroom where instructions are vague, expectations are unclear, there's no clear sequence to activities, feedback is minimal or unhelpful.
Okay, yeah, that sounds confusing.
In that kind of setting, learners are often left to just figure things out entirely on their own.
Hmm.
And this can inadvertently increase cognitive load.
Because they're spending mental energy just trying to figure out what they're supposed to be doing.
Precisely. Instead of focusing their cognitive resources on actually learning the material, they're bogged down trying to understand the task itself and what's expected.
That makes perfect sense. Chaos increases extraneous load. Structure helps manage it.
You got it? Now, the study also mentioned this circumplex model of teacher motivating styles. Sounds a bit technical.
Yeah, can you give us a simpler way to think about that? Like maybe for you listening, imagine it like a map.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah.
It's basically a way of visually representing these different teaching approaches based on those two dimensions we discussed: autonomy support versus control, and structure versus chaos.
Okay, so like plotting them on a graph.
Sort of. Imagine a circle, like a compass. One axis goes from high-need support teachers who are great at fostering autonomy, competence, relatedness, down to need-thwarting teachers who actively undermine those needs.
Okay, support versus thwarting. What's the other axis?
The other axis represents how directive the teacher is. It ranges from very teacher-led, with lots of guidance and explicit instruction, over to more student-led approaches, where learners have more freedom to direct their own learning path.
Teacher-led versus student-led. Got it.
And this circle is then divided into different sections or quadrants, representing different overall teaching styles that combine these dimensions. Like you could have structured autonomy support or chaotic control. It gives a more nuanced picture than just saying good or bad.
Okay, I think I can picture that map. So now let's finally dive into what the study actually found when they looked at the data from those Australian students. Starting with AIM-1, which was about the impact of load reduction instruction. What were the key results?
Okay, so the study found a really clear and significant link here. Teachers who reported using more of those load-reducing strategies in their classrooms, well, their students reported experiencing lower levels of cognitive load.
Both types, intrinsic and extraneous.
Both types, yeah. Especially the unnecessary extraneous load, but also, interestingly, to a lesser extent, even the inherent intrinsic load seemed a bit lower, perhaps because things felt more manageable overall.
Okay, so less mental strain. What about motivation and engagement?
Even more importantly, perhaps for you listening, they found a strong positive connection between load reduction instruction and students showing more autonomous motivation, the good kind.
Right, wanting to learn for its own sake or because they see the value.
Exactly. Also, greater engagement in classroom activities and, importantly, higher academic achievement based on their actual school-reported grades.
Wow. So these strategies really seem to tick all the boxes. Lower load, better motivation, more engagement, better grades.
Pretty much. And they also found a negative link with disengagement. So when teachers used more load reduction techniques, students were significantly less likely to feel disconnected or checked out from their learning.
So using these practical strategies, breaking things down, providing support, giving good feedback, it not only eases the mental workload, but also makes students more willing and able to learn effectively. It really sounds fundamental.
It does seem that way. And the study also mentioned indirect effects. What does that mean?
Ah, yes. What did that tell us about how these things work together?
Well, it means that the positive impact of load reduction instruction on motivation and engagement wasn't purely direct. It wasn't just that load reduction caused motivation independently.
Okay.
Part of its positive effect on motivation and engagement was achieved because it first reduced cognitive load. So reducing the load was a key step on the way to boosting motivation and engagement.
Ah, I see. So minimizing that mental clutter is one of the main pathways through which these strategies lead to better motivation and engagement outcomes.
That seems to be a key part of the mechanism, yes.
Got it. Okay, that covers AIM-1. Now let's move on to AIM-2, which looked at the teacher's overall motivating style using that circumplex model map we discussed. What were the big findings there?
This is where that interesting sinusoidal pattern came up. When they mapped those different teaching styles from the circumplex model onto the various student outcomes, load, motivation, engagement, achievement, they saw this kind of wave-like pattern of correlations around the circle.
A sinusoidal pattern, like a sine wave in math.
Exactly like that shape. So styles that were high in autonomy support and also provided clear structure, those combinations were consistently linked with students reporting lower cognitive load, both extraneous and intrinsic.
Okay, lower load with autonomy, support, and structure. And I'm guessing those same styles also had the positive effects on the other factors.
Absolutely. Those autonomy supportive and structured teaching styles were positively associated with higher autonomous motivation, higher engagement in learning, and better academic achievement.
And less disengagement.
And less disengagement, yes. They were negatively associated with students feeling checked out.
Okay, so that side of the map looks very positive. What about the opposite styles?
But conversely, teaching styles that were characterized by chaos, lacking structure, and those that were domineering and controlling, they showed pretty much the opposite pattern.
So higher load.
Higher reported cognitive load, lower levels of autonomous motivation, lower engagement, lower achievement, and, unsurprisingly, higher levels of disengagement among the students.
Wow, that paints a really clear picture. Support and structure are good. Chaos and controlling are generally bad for learning outcomes.
That's the broad pattern, yes. But the study did note something interesting about one specific sub-area within the controlling styles, the demanding style. The results there were a bit more ambiguous or nuanced.
Demanding? How so? Why might that be different from other controlling styles?
Well, it suggests that maybe the type of control, or perhaps how it's perceived by the students, really matters. Being demanding, like having high expectations, might be interpreted differently depending on the overall context.
Like, if the teacher is generally supportive and caring, being demanding might feel different than if they're cold and critical.
Exactly. If high demands are coupled with clear expectations, good rationale, and consistent support, maybe even warmth, perhaps it could be perceived by some students as the teacher caring about their progress, fostering competence. But if it just comes across as relentless pressure, inflexible deadlines, and constant evaluation,
Then it's likely to undermine motivation and increase stress, just like the other controlling styles.
precisely. So the way demands are made seems crucial.
Okay, that's a really useful nuance. So let's try and synthesize all of this. What are the main takeaways for you, our listener, from all this research? What should people really remember about cognitive load, motivation, and how they interact?
I think one of the absolute most crucial takeaways is that the strategies we use to manage cognitive load and the strategies we use to support motivation are not in conflict. You don't have to choose between clarity and engagement.
Right, they actually seem to work together.
Very much so. They often work synergistically. Effective teaching, or really effective instruction or communication in any context, seems to involve providing that clear structure and guidance to manage load, while also fostering a sense of autonomy, competence, and relatedness for the learner.
So it's not structure or autonomy, it's structure and autonomy support.
Exactly. And it strongly suggests that deliberately creating excessively difficult or poorly presented material, intentionally or unintentionally creating high extraneous load, is actively working against your goals if you want to increase motivation and engagement.
Yeah, it's like putting a huge hurdle right in front of someone you want to encourage to run.
That's a great way to put it. It just makes the whole process more effortful and less appealing, undermining their intrinsic drive.
And it also seems important that it's not just about specific techniques, right? Like ticking boxes for breaking it down or giving choices.
Absolutely. The research suggests that the instructors or teachers' overall style, how they interact, the general climate they create in the learning environment plays a really significant role in how learners process information and their fundamental desire to learn and engage.
It's about the whole package.
It really is. It's about creating a space, whether physical or virtual, that minimizes that unnecessary mental clutter while also actively supporting those basic psychological needs for feeling competent, connected, and in control. That's where motivation seems to thrive.
This has been incredibly insightful. Okay, so to really try and bring it home, the core message seems to be something like this. When learning experiences are designed well, structured clearly to minimize that pointless mental struggle.
Extraneous load.
Right. And when individuals feel that sense of competence, I can do this, and autonomy, I have some say in this, that's when motivation really catches fire.
Beautifully put. And that leads directly to deeper engagement, better focus, and ultimately a much better understanding of whatever it is you're trying to learn.
And that connects right back to that feeling we started with, right? That feeling of being overwhelmed, brain full.
Exactly. By understanding these underlying principles,
Mm.
cognitive load on one hand, self-determination and motivation on the other, you, the listener, can hopefully feel more empowered.
Empowered in your own learning, maybe. Or if you teach or train others.
Both. Whether you're tackling a new subject yourself, trying to master a skill, or you're in a position where you're guiding or teaching other people, these ideas can help you make that process more effective and hopefully more positive.
Okay, so here's maybe a final thought for you to mull over after this deep dive. Think about the learning environments you find yourself in, or perhaps learning experiences you design for others, maybe at work or even with your kids.
Yeah.
How could you apply these insights? How could you tweak things to reduce that unnecessary cognitive load? How could you better support those needs for autonomy and competence?
What small changes could you make? Maybe how you structure information, or how you offer choices, or how you give feedback.
Exactly. Small changes that might lead to pretty significant improvements in how engaged people are and how deeply they actually understand the material in the end.
It might be really worthwhile, if this sparked your interest, to maybe explore these ideas of cognitive load theory and self-determination theory a little further on your own time. There's a lot more depth there.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for joining us for this deep dive into making learning work better for our brains and our motivation.